Hi, welcome to another random Scottish history, Scottish Railway incidents reading for September of 1900. The usual trigger warnings apply. Everyone stood a chance of getting killed on Scotland's railways, along with every other railway in the world at the time. Children, adults, the elderly, pets, farm animals, those who choose to end their lives on the line and those who don't, mostly. So there's a lot going on. Not very much positive, but obviously there were positive changes being made with regard to safety and stopping these things from happening. So consider these lessons the railways learnt, I guess. So to start us off, we have Dundee Evening Telegraph, Saturday the 1st of September, a fatal accident at Perth railway station. Last night a fatal accident occurred at the Highland Railway engine sheds at Perth railway station. It appears that a young man named John Ross, who is a fireman in the employment of the Highland Railway Company, had been relieved from his work on a shunting engine at 9:15, and a quarter of an hour later his body was found lying on the down goods line about 10 yards north of the Highland Railway engine sheds at Glasgow Road Bridge, he having been run down by an engine or goods train. His left arm was severed at the shoulder, while his right hand was smashed, and his face was mutilated almost beyond recognition. Dr. Parker Stewart was called and examined the body, which was afterwards removed by the police to the mortuary. Deceased, who was about 20 years of age, belonged to Inversham.
Off to a flying start. So next up, we've got Dundee Evening Post, Monday 3rd of September, a miraculous escape. About 10 o'clock on Saturday night, a machine man named Joseph Brown, 40 years old, residing at 4 Canal Street in Clydebank, had a miraculous escape from being killed at Partick Station on the North British Railway. It appeared that he, together with his wife and family, were standing on the west platform awaiting the arrival of the Clydebank train when he stumbled and fell on the rails as the Balloch train was approaching. Unfortunately, the driver of the engine did not observe the accident, and before the alarm could be given, the engine and 4 carriages passed over the man. On being extricated, it was found that Brown had escaped with a fracture of the right ankle. He was at once removed to the Western Infirmary in the ambulance wagon, where it was found necessary to amputate the foot. He got lucky though, I mean, let's be honest.
Usual amputations involved. Dundee Evening Post for Wednesday the 5th of September. A joiner named William McLachlan, 65 years of age, residing at 13 Crow Road, Partick, was instantaneously killed yesterday in Whiteinch while on his way home from work. It appears that as he was in the act of crossing from South Street into Squire Street, he failed to observe an approaching train. The rails, by the way, being laid along the centre of the latter street for the purpose of facilitating shipyard traffic, and was knocked down and run over by an engine and 2 wagons. The body of the unfortunate man was frightfully mangled. Frightfully mangled. You hear that.
Next up, Midlothian Journal, Friday the 7th of September, railway accident. On Monday morning, a rather alarming railway accident took place on the railway line near the junction. It was occasioned by 2 carriages of the 6:10 train from Carstairs to Edinburgh failing to take the points at the junction and going off the line. The train, fortunately, was going slowly at the time owing to shunting operations. The 2 carriages left the rails at the points, but owing to the immediate application of the Westinghouse brake, the train was brought to a standstill before any further damage was done. Nobody was hurt, but the accident delayed the train for over an hour. Well, delays.
Seems like shunting was a positive force in that story.
Yeah, I was going to say shunting for once, actually.
For the Dundee Evening Post, Friday 7th of September, we have railway accident at Dundee, yardsman seriously injured. Late last night, a somewhat serious accident occurred in the North British Railway Company's goods yard at Dundee, as a result of which the foreman yardsman named William Forgan sustained severe injuries. It appears that while shunting operations were in progress in the yard, Forgan had gone to watch the approach of the Berwick train, and while doing so a pilot engine approached from the West Goods Yard, and Forgan, who apparently did not observe it, was struck by the buffer of the engine and thrown violently to the ground. His head was cut, while one of his arms was apparently dislocated or fractured, but he didn't lose any body bits, so
too bad.
Probably fortunate.
Next up, North British Daily Mail, Tuesday 11th September, boy killed at Coatbridge. Yesterday, John Wiley, 13-year-old son of John Wiley, a tube worker residing in Main Street, Coatbridge, was killed on the Caledonian Railway between Calder and Whifflet. The lad is said to have been walking along the line when the 10:40 train leaving Airdrie run him down. Ah, that's a shame.
We have a House of Commons article from the Buchan Observer and East Aberdeenshire Advertiser for Tuesday the 11th of September. Laws of the Session, all rights reserved. The following is a continuation of the summary of Acts of Parliament which have received the royal assent during the present session, of which Act 27 applies to what we're doing. It's the prevention of railway accidents. This is an act for the better prevention of accidents on railways and applies mainly to persons employed thereon. It gives, in Clause 1, power to the Board of Trade to make rules as to dangerous railway operations. Such rules, if objected to, may be referred to the Railway Commissioners, and in considering objections, the Commissioners have to have regard to the question whether the requirements of the rule would materially interfere with the trade of the country or the necessary operations of any railway company. By consent of the Board of Trade and the objectors, any objection may be referred to a referee in lieu of the Commissioners. In particular cases, the Board may make a specific order to take the place of the general rule. When the alterations required by the Board of Trade's rules entail capital expenditure, the Board may sanction the issue of debenture stock to the extent of the necessary expenditure. The Act applies to the United Kingdom. So that sounds as if the Board of Trade can now compel railway companies, in a sense, to make the changes in safety that they've been talking about probably since the inception of the railways.
Bit of progress, I like that. So next up, Scotsman, Thursday 13th September, accident near Cambuslang. An accident occurred yesterday in connection with the operations at the formation of the new Lanarkshire and Ayrshire Railway near Cambuslang. A young engine driver named William Cameron, while attempting to stop some wagons, was struck on the head with a sprag and so severely injured that he had to be removed to the Glasgow Royal Infirmary.
Huntly Express for Friday the 14th of September. Boy falls from a train. A boy named William Reid, 6 years of age, son of Mr. William Reid, fisherman, Seatown, Buckie, fell from a train on Monday night and had a miraculous escape. He was travelling home in the train due to arrive at Buckie at 6:30 p.m. and, when about half a mile from Glasgow station, the door of the compartment suddenly opened and he fell out. The train was stopped and, on being back to the scene of the accident, it was found that, beyond a few cuts in the face, the little fellow had escaped unhurt, which can't be said for many of the adults that went the same way out of the train.
Maybe they should post more signs on these doors or something like that. It seems to happen quite a lot. Next up we got Dundee Courier, Friday 14th September, killed on the Highland Line. Last night a distressing fatal accident occurred on the Highland Railway at Newton Moor Station, where James Ormiston, a brakesman, lost his life. Ormiston was employed as a brakesman on the 4:15 p.m. goods train from Inverness to Perth, and while engaged in shunting operations, he was caught mortally wounded. He only survived 40 minutes. Deceased, who was 25 years of age, was a native of Kinbrace in Sutherlandshire and was unmarried. Well, there you go, shunting.
I mean, if
Straight
they're
back to
going
being
to
a bad
die,
thing.
it's probably better they do it sooner rather than later. I think a lot of these injuries you wouldn't have wanted to live through. The Dundee Evening Post for Tuesday the 18th of September. The body of a man in a terribly mutilated condition was found on Sunday forenoon on the Alva branch line of the North British Railway, a short distance from Cambus Station. The body is surmised to be that of Andrew Murray, distillery worker Cambus, and he must have been killed by a train leaving Cambus for Alva at 8 o'clock on Saturday night. When run over, deceased was less than 150 yards from his own home.
Next up, we've got Greenock Telegraph and Clyde Shipping Gazette, Tuesday the 18th. Fatal accident inquiries in Greenock today. At Greenock Sheriff Court today, before Sheriff Begg and a jury, a public inquiry was held into the circumstances attending the deaths of 3 men who were fatally injured while following their usual employment in Greenock and Port Glasgow. The first inquiry took place in regard to the death of Francis Harkins, cattleman, who resided at 14 Ann Street in Greenock, and who was in the employment of the Caledonian Railway Company. The evidence showed that he was on the railway about 100 yards east of Dellingburn Street Bridge, waiting on the arrival of a train with sheep, and while in the act of crossing the line, he was knocked down by a passenger train from Glasgow and killed almost instantaneously. There you go.
The Dundee Evening Post for Wednesday the 19th of September. The accident list. While Thomas Weir, 22 years old, a lorryman in the employment of the Caledonian Railway Company who resides in Stewarton Station, Wishaw, was, along with several others, engaged in taking off a lorry from a wagon at the Central Goods Station, Wishaw. The rope broke and the side of the lorry knocked him down, and afterwards fell upon him. He sustained a scalp wound 2 inches long, and his right leg was broken above the ankle. He was attended by Dr. Alexander Logan, who ordered his removal to the Glasgow Royal Infirmary. Then we have last night the 4 o'clock corridor train from St Enoch's to Stranraer ran down a man between Dalry and Kilbirnie. The driver drew up at Dalry and reported the circumstance, and the station master, along with the superintendent McCreath and 2 constables, proceeded along the line to the spot indicated, where they found a man, name unknown, lying on the line fearfully mangled. He was removed to Glengarnock Station. So we'll maybe find out who he is later on.
So next we've got Dundee Evening Telegraph, Wednesday 19th September. Clergyman's marvellous escape, uninjured though run over by a train. Fair enough. So we got on Monday afternoon, while Reverend Mr. Nicol, United Presbyterian Church, Nairn, was attempting to cross the rails at Nairn Railway Station, he slipped and fell in front of a goods train, consisting of an engine and 5 wagons, which was drawing up to the platform. Mr. Nicol had the presence of mind to lie flat on the ground between the rails, and the train passed over him without doing any injury beyond tearing a portion of his clothes. The accident caused intense excitement among those who witnessed it, but they were relieved when they found that Mr. Nicol was uninjured. So maybe that's the theme today.
Alex was asking in the last video whether people could escape getting severely injured by remaining in the middle of the track when a train went over them. And I'd answered yes, they could, because like where man here, quite a lot of people did just exactly the same thing and managed to escape with very little injury.
When I was a kid, I thought like the ruts in the middle, like between the rails, there was like a cog underneath the train that sort of went in between them, you know. I was a child, obviously, but you know, there's some logic to that, I think.
Sure. From the Dundee Evening Post, Thursday 20th of September, we have railway smash in the Caledonian, great destruction to rolling stock, powder van derailed. About 10 o'clock this morning, a serious smash occurred on the Caledonian Railway a little to the north of Motherwell Railway Station. A goods and mineral mixed train from the south was passing through the station at a good speed when one of the axles of one of the wagons broke. The damaged wagon, after dragging along the line for a considerable distance, turned broadside at the diamond points and caused a great upheaval. No fewer than 9 wagons were destroyed, some being completely turned over and lying in a heap at the Lesmahago junction. One of the derailed vehicles was a gunpowder van. The others contained stores and minerals. The accident blocked all the lines except the down line to Glasgow, and there was consequently a great delay in the traffic. Had it not torn up the permanent way and damaged so much rolling stock, that likely wouldn't have made it as an article into the series, because delays, they're not anything to write home about, you know.
Well, they do cost some rich people a little bit of money, and they don't like that.
I mean, if there was quite a lot of destruction, like of the line or the trains or what they were carrying, then sure, I would add that in just as a point of interest, but...
Yes, the next up we got Inverness Courier, Friday 21st September, Grantown on Spey, surfaceman killed. Early on Wednesday morning, intelligence was received in Grantown that the body of a surfaceman named Bruce, who was in the employment of the Highland Railway Company, had been found on the railway in the vicinity of the New Porter Lodge. It appears that deceased, who was in Grantown during the preceding evening, had, while making his way homewards, been run over by a train and killed on the spot. Much sympathy is felt for the friends and the friends of the deceased, who was well known in the vicinity.
Midlothian Journal for Friday 21st September. Fatal accident at Portobello Station. A shunter named George Gardner, who resided at Bruntstein Farm and who was 28 years of age, met with his death last night about 9:30 at Portobello Station. The young fellow had been at the Bothay near to Hope's Bridge, and it is conjectured that in leaving to take up duty he had stumbled in front of a goods train which was leaving the station at the time. I think Bothays were usually just like little places where you could hole up and respite out the weather. So I think they were constructed by railway companies for the staff as a kind of break rooms and things between their shifts or between needing their help or whatever.
So I'm thinking like a sort of large bus shelter, but has it got like facilities in it or like a fireplace? You know, like
I think it would have been like a small building, like I mean, at the least it would have been like a shed structure. At the most it would have been an actual brick building. Like
a wee cottage or something.
Aye, but just like a single room deal, I think. Maybe with a fireplace to keep the place warm.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah. Especially with all these unheated trains with sad wee passengers
Well,
freezing.
Braziers were pretty common in the waiting rooms and things, so they might have had a wee brazier. Like.
So next up we got Dundee Courier, Saturday the 22nd of September. Accident at Forfar Station, narrow escape of a Perth traveller. Last night, a commercial traveller named John Thompson, residing at 22 Ballantyne Place in Perth and representing the firm of Messrs J&R, Tennant, Lager, beer manufacturers, Glasgow, had a narrow escape with his life at Forfar Station. The unfortunate man, who is married and is about 40 years of age, had been in town in the course of the day in pursuance of his duties and evidently intended to return to Perth per the 6:50 train from Forfar. The train was in motion, however, before he attempted to get into his carriage, and missing his footing, he fell between the last passenger vehicle and the guard's van. The train, which had by this time attained considerable momentum, was immediately stopped, and on the man being examined, it was found that he had received a deep wound in the back of his head and another over the eye. He received first aid at the hands of the railway officials and was afterwards removed to the infirmary on a stretcher, quite conscious but evidently suffering severely. At the infirmary, Dr. Alexander discovered that the skull had been fractured and found it necessary to stitch the wounds back and front. The injured man is progressing as favourably as can be expected in the circumstances. So if your train's leaving and you really want to jump on it, maybe think twice. Like just call it a day. Get the next one. Like,
You don't really have the option these days. It's funny because everyone knows of Tennant's Lager beer too, like, but Lager Laager, and it's lager beer, like it's a type of beer, you know. It wasn't just lager.
Calling it lager beer feels like it's kind of the same vein as like smoked flavoured, bacon or whatever. It's like it sort of is what it is, but there's a wee disclaimer, some sort of vibe from that,
The double A would suggest it's like a kind of Dutch origin or something. For the Falkirk Herald, Saturday 22nd of September, we've got another House of Commons note here. Automatic couplings for railway wagons. I've been urging this one along. Mr. John McLaren's new patent. Notwithstanding precautions, accidents to railway servants are still all too frequent, and the introduction and practical use of contrivances tending towards a diminution of these dangers is always to be welcomed. But recently a Royal Commission held an inquiry into the cause of and the best means of preventing accidents to employees on the line. The evidence going to show the great danger arising from the use of the present system of coupling and uncoupling of wagons by means of pole or hand, and the benefit which would accrue from the introduction of some means by which this work could be performed by mechanism fitted for preference at the side of the wagon. In view of those opinions, considerable importance must be attached to the invention of Mr. John McLaren, who has given a deal of time and labour to the matter, had just patented a coupling which, while possessing the advantages of simplicity of construction, appears at the same time to be fitted in every way for the purpose intended. It has no springs or weak points liable to go out of order, and can be fixed on the wagon without any change in the present position of links or gab, while the act of coupling can be performed on curves and straight lines as with the present pole, and if desired can be so fixed that, when shunting, the wagons will, on contact, automatically couple themselves. The nature of the invention is as follows. A lever handle is fixed at both sides of the wagon on a shaft extending beneath and from the side to the side of the wagon, so that by lifting either of these, the lever handles the mechanism set in motion lifts the coupling chain, which is of the ordinary form, clear of the gap, and the wagon is thus uncoupled. In order to couple the wagons, the lever handle is lifted and is preferably fixed in any desired position according to the respective heights of the wagons to be coupled by a wedge, which, when released, allows the coupling link to fall into the gap, thus coupling the wagon. The shaft on which the lever handles are secured is cranked at its midpoint, and to this crank a short connecting link is connected, the other end of the link being centred on a pin carried on pivoted arms depending from a pivot from the bottom of the wagon. At the lower end of these pivoted arms, one end of a coupling fork is centred, the fork being connected at its outer end with the outer link of the coupling chain. The depending pivoted arm and coupling fork together form a taggle, which, when straightened out by the turning of the crank on the lever handle shaft, brings the coupling links into position to be lowered over the gap, a rest or guide being formed at the end of the wagon in order to support and direct the coupling link to its position over the gap. The action of the apparatus is as follows. When a wagon is to be coupled, either of the lever handles at the side of the wagon is turned, the crank of the shaft acting on the connecting link to pull it forward, which link, because of its connection to the depending arms, draws these forward, and these arms in turn push forward the lifting fork, to whose end the coupling link is pivoted, the fork being guided forward and upward by the rest or guide on the wagon end in order to bring the coupling link over and beyond the point of the gab, the link being retained in this position by inserting the wedge between the handle in a fixed quadrant, thus preventing the return of the coupling fork to its original position. On releasing the lever handle by removing the wedge, the coupling link drops over the gap and the wagon is coupled. The wagon is uncoupled by turning the lever handle when the action takes place exactly as in coupling, the lever handle being retained in this position by the wedge or by hand until the wagons are at a short distance from each other. From the above description, it will be seen that the invention is one likely to commend itself to railway and other companies possessing rolling stock, and, it is hoped, will meet with the approval and support of all interested. There were lots of terms in that likely don't apply to the railways anymore. In fact, we have folk who both work on the railways, have worked on the railways, and are just purely railway enthusiasts who are watching this video just now as patrons. Let us know. Did that make sense to you? Did any of that? Could you imagine what I was talking about there? Does that make sense in your world where coupling and shunting and that is? Because I kind of want to know. I'm curious because that was gibberish.
Yeah. I would have understood that just as much if it was in Aramaic or something like that. You know, that
Yeah.
I was like just
Couldn't
just
even
series
imagine
of
it.
words is what I could best describe that as. Oofed. Anyway.
So yes, if one of our patrons
Maybe a diagram.
could-
I think definitely a diagram with that
Aye.
might have helped. Colour coded and
Aye,
animated, you know.
I mean, I just want to know that does it make sense to someone? Like that's
Yeah.
all I want to know.
Interesting stuff, nonetheless. So next up, Edinburgh Evening News, Saturday 22nd of September, accident on the railway at Wallingford. An old man named Joseph Allen, belonging to Niddry, was this afternoon knocked down and seriously injured on the railway line near Wallingford Colliery siding. He had been on the line and was overtaken by an engine going to Wallingford to take away a mineral train. Allen sustained severe injuries to his head and spine. He was conveyed on the engine to Portobello for medical treatment. He was employed by the Edinburgh Colliery Company.
I mean, you don't want to get a spinal injury these
No,
days, much less back when medicine was a little more in its infancy. For the Alloa Advertiser, Saturday the 22nd of September, we have a fatal accident on the railway. I believe this is a follow-on article from one previously. On Sabbath forenoon, the body of a man was found on the branch line to Alva, just outside Cambus Station, in a terribly mutilated condition. Constable Duncan was at once communicated with when the body was identified as that of Andrew Murray, distillery worker, 45 years old, who resided at Dovecote Cottage, Cambus, with his brother. It is supposed that the unfortunate man was knocked down by the last train to Alva from Alloa on the Saturday evening while on his way home. The body, which was cut in two and fearfully mangled, was taken to the Dovecote.
Oofed.
Does that mean... See... That makes it sound like his body in two different bits was literally taken straight to his cottage for his brother to deal with, which might have been the case.
Yeah, could have been. Nasty stuff. So, North British Daily Mail, Saturday 22nd, and it's a two-part one. This is a fatal result of accident. James McGoldrick, labourer who was knocked down on the North British Railway near Partick Station on Wednesday morning and severely injured, has died in the Western Infirmary. Mr McGoldrick was 29 years of age, married and resided at 31 Crawford Street in Partick. And then the follow-up, or the next one, railway accident, a man killed. A serious railway accident occurred yesterday morning at the Caledonian Locomotive Works, Springburn Road in Glasgow, whereby one man was killed and another very seriously injured. Both men were plate layers, and at the time of the occurrence were at work on the lines in the shunting yard. They had just left one set of rails to get out of the way of an engine that was coming along. When in doing so, they stepped in front of another engine that was being driven along a neighbouring set of rails. Both men were knocked down. One of them, John Ray, 303 Charles Street, St Rollox, was so severely crushed about the head that he succumbed a few minutes after his admission to the Royal Infirmary. The other man was badly injured about the feet, and he also sustained a scalp wound. He lies in the infirmary in a critical condition. Well, that's more of the same from previous episodes there. Unless I can't really say anything else about that we haven't said already, really.
It's just, your attention getting taken by the one train, just don't let it take your mind off what's happening on the other line, it's just all the time in these.
Look both ways.
The Scotsman for Tuesday 25th of September gives us fatality on the railway. A permanent way watchman named William Nelson, residing in Wishaw, met his death on the Caledonian Railway between Holytown and Wishaw last night. Nelson had left his work at Carfin and while making his way along the line was run down by a passenger train when within half a mile of Wishaw Central Station. All these people almost home.
That's the way. Knackered after a day's work. Now next up, Dundee Evening Post, Wednesday 26th. Fife girl's sad death. The dead body of a young girl was found last night on the North British Railway near Aberdour. The girl had been run over by a train, the head being severed from the trunk. The body has been identified as that of Rosina Clark, 13 years old, daughter of William Clark, Bleachfield worker, Milton Green, Dunfermline, who left home on Monday morning. Well, that's a shame, that one.
Decapitated children.
Yeah, that's messed up.
How there wasn't just a pure massive outcry from the public, Coatbridge Express, Wednesday 26th of September, platelayer killed. John Carr, 60 years of age, platelayer who resided at Barrack Square, Carfin, lost his life in the railway siding leading to Dixon's Colliery on Saturday. He was engaged on the line when he was run down by a train of loaded wagons, 3 of the trucks passing over his right leg, completely severing it. He died in about half an hour.
3 trucks will do it. Okay, the next one appears to be the last one for September. So Shetland Times, Saturday the 29th, railway pier damaged by fire. A fire broke out early on Friday morning at the Caledonian Railway Company's pier at Weems Bay and did damage estimated at £15,000. The origin of the fire is unknown, but the flames are supposed to have first appeared in the oil store. That portion of the pier nearest the station was soon on fire, and a high wind drove the flames over the station. The station master and railway employees did their best to subdue the fire until the arrival of the brigade from Largs, and were successful in saving the station. The greater portion of the pier, however, was completely destroyed, together with several hundred tons of wooden blocks and pillars which were to be used to extend the pier. Weems Bay is one of the termini of the Caledonian Railway Company, where steamboats await the arrival of trains.
The railway company folk aren't going to bother too much about the pier that the trains don't go down, so...
Yeah, collateral of some kind.
As long as they save the station.
£15,000, wonder how much that would be these days.
Well, it's actually one of the higher ends of damage amounts. Usually it was it gives you amounts in maybe a couple of thousand at the most, or some hundreds. 15,000 is quite a substantial amount of money for the fire that was likely caused by a fucking train going through the station anyway.
And was probably not held responsible for it either.
That's how they happen, just sparks for the tender, ending up in the wood or the oil store, just...
So I don't know, 15 grand, do you think that would be like 7-figure equivalent these days?
Let's find it.
Another point of interest, employees was spelt like it was a French word. It's, the accent over the E and that.
Brits used to not be scared of accented letters.
Yeah.
Employee used to not have 2 E's at the end. It was 1 E with an accent over it.
Employee.
Yeah, it's a bit like if you've seen the show and tell series, the reading of Aladdin. Aladdin Ab al-Shamat, I think his name was, because they used to not bother too much about these foreign spellings, and that they like to anglicise everything now as much as possible. So that's what we've got.
I mean, it can be a wee bit tricky sometimes reading like script from that time period, because it was different style of writing. You know, it's more I don't know what's the word. I don't know the word.
Archaic.
I mean, it's archaic, yeah, but it wasn't user friendly, if you know what I mean. There was no kids gloves.
Oh, yeah, they didn't hold back. Like, that was another thing I was thinking. We were talking in another episode about how people's addresses were so freely given. That of not just staff that ended up involved in accidents and events, but also passengers that got caught up in them, and sometimes witnesses, their addresses would be given as just part of the report, and it doesn't really happen now. But another thing that doesn't happen now is children's names aren't given out if they've been accused of a crime. That will be hidden, because there's the idea that children still have hope of redemption,
rehabilitation, or
because as an adult you're not really the same person as you were as a child, you know. But you got these fire raisers and these kids putting stuff on the lines to see what would happen and trying to derail trains. Their names are all given, plus their sentences, sometimes their addresses.
Named and shamed straight off the bat.
Yeah,
family lineage, etc.
Yeah, they didn't bother that. So, £15,000 in 1900 from the Bank of England's inflation calculator here gives us £1,885,434.78 now. So that was the damage incurred at, was it Wemyss Bay Station?
Wemyss Bay Station for the pier, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, honestly, you just don't see the amounts up to 15,000 in these articles very often at all. I think my eyebrows went up when Alex read that, because that's quite a lot of money, but there you go. So,
that stood out to me
really quite a lot of money
yeah.
that were checked. So,
well,
that was interesting.
That was September.
This is done for September. If you want to do it again with us, there's going to be October coming up next week. So
maybe even ghosts. Probably not ghosts, but you know, October.
Why not? See you later.